So why do we love MAP 10 for recovery? Well, let's talk about both of them. First, let's talk about recovery, exactly what it means. I think a time-tested and proven method that's been consistent within folks doing something that's more intense than just exercising for fitness purposes over time has really been the method of doing something easy in relation to how often you do something hard. In different circles called the high-low methods, or for every hard workout you do an easy workout. There's been multiple different ways to really look at that. And we call it MAP 10, MAP standing for Maximal Aerobic Power. It's what is taught in our OPEX CCP courses as preliminary entrance for individuals into learning how to become aerobic. Our methods are based upon teaching people how to create some ability to do it slowly first and effectively. We call it gain pace and gain volume through slow, low fatigue efforts first, and then build upon that pace over time. It's not necessarily applicable to every audience, but in terms of principles of design, you'd want to start with more endurance activities in the aerobic continuum. Those who really don't start in that have generally have done some practice or do have a background within the aerobic continuum, and so they have practiced years and years of the slower method in different ways. It's just that it didn't come up in conversation, or people didn't think about looking into the dose response of what that training was prior. And so therefore, if they do harder intervals today, you could see how some people could say that slow training was useless for them because it made them slow, or that they're progressing because they're doing harder intervals or faster intervals, and they've just forgot to question exactly what they were doing for their whole career. And in most cases, when you've asked those questions like I have, you start to see that they have a big background in easy, slow aerobic activity. So just keep asking those questions, you can see to be true. Solange is here today doing what we call at OPEX Around the World, round the world method of easy aerobic work. It's a very low intense activity at almost conversational pace. Measurements on this for heart rate bring people into like 55 to 62, 64, 65% of their maximal heart rate, and I'll explain a little bit why that's not necessarily what you should be entirely looking at, because each modality is different. But what we ask people to do is to do multiple different methods of easy aerobic activity, and they put them back to back for a time frame. And they do this a number of times a week, which helps them recover between their intense pieces. And there's a lot of benefits to that. Some of them being, in more cases than not, it's just it can help move blood. A key point is not only in fitness, but health in general. It's inside of us to sustain and go long. If the argument is that it's hard on people because they're too big, out of shape, or wrong mechanically, that's a pretty poor argument to not be moving as much as we possibly can. It can increase the efficiency of the heart based upon tone and proper stress and blood filling and expulsion. It can be effective at proving all of that. It can increase oxygen delivery to areas within multiple muscles. That's the key, sport-specific response that we want, especially if Solange is going to be competing in CrossFit or doing that. The sport-specific response to only cycling, for example, and having no moving parts other than the legs is a small reason why this mixed modal version of it is more important for aerobic development, because you get this full body O2 efficiency at the muscle level. It can also improve the lung efficiency. And you can see, which is, I'm going to give you a close-up of her breath and her rate of breathing during this. At the right rates and the patterns, one can take advantage through slower work of how the O2 gets to the blood and muscles. With the wrong rates and wrong knowledge of that limitation, it gets weakened. And in most cases, this is where we pick up, limitations in people's breathing through our on-site, forced expiratory volume testing. We can pick up limitations in some people's capacity, and in large case, it's due to, incorrect nervous system response to be able to breathe and use their diaphragm correctly, or they actually have blockages because they get jammed up from so much really hard work, which is a little bit more complex to explain. But what we want to do is to train, the efficiency of breath through these really low, easy activities, and as to how it works. I've seen especially some benefit in trying to make people more and more efficient at intense work, and to be able to like raise threshold, because the whole key for intense activity, you can't just go slow all the time. You actually have to compete and do intense work, like Ryan Fark and Brian and Hank are doing in the background, as you can see as well. I think that it can prevent the rate at which sugars are burned when training at higher rates of work, like threshold or peaking or the high race pace scenarios. And this is generally from my empirical data of watching people get to higher periods of that threshold and pushing fatigue to the right because of this slow, easy aerobic training slapped on top of their training programs of current intensity and progression. The brain and body and mind get used to patterns of effort with fuel usage, and when these systems get used to efficiency at aerobic work, it does not prevent power output or decreases in strength as some may think. One can still use adrenaline and sugars as needed when needed if it's trained appropriately based upon the task. But when the aerobic system is well established through reps and time, it's tougher to gas out fast, which in some cases is a real nice jump for individuals. So the whole idea of doing the easy aerobic work is all those things, plus I see how it basically doesn't start up that engine of burning sugars too quickly when the time comes to be able to do it. As well known within the studies of balancing out the correct kind of aerobic training, it can create great tone for the nervous system. The rhythm of the longer aerobic work without fatigue and stress to the individual creates a solid foundation of relaxation, really, in the training of that easy stuff, along with the effect it has for hours afterwards on that nervous system. There are various branches of the system that we speak of, and the ability of each is important. But as in everything, there must be a homeostasis and balance within. This aerobic training basically can create a much needed balancing for a lot of day-to-day folks, along with athletes. And it's very easily seen. You know, our coaches just got together a couple of days ago. We will go for a hike, and we appreciate the benefits of that, and how easy walking or an easy, aerobic work is no different than what previous athletes used to call flow work or easy work or flushing, a recovery spin, a recovery run, even sled work in weightlifting circles, or speed work or supplementary work, or even the old school strongmen used to do gymnastic activities of hundreds and hundreds of squats and push-ups a day. This was all easy blood flow aerobic work for them, and it's no different than what you're seeing Solange do here in what we call round the world. And for a really important thing within fitness also, it can start the process of developing muscle endurance at really low levels of intensity, because a lot of people may have the ability to contract a muscle, but they can't do those contractions submaximally for a long period of time without pooping out or not being able to send O2 into the system, be used efficiently, or they can't recover really quickly from a maximal contraction. So this process of developing muscle endurance at a really low level is a really key thing. As mentioned previously, with the downside of specificity, the upside of doing longer aerobic work can start the process of making muscle endurance last longer, so to speak, when there are minimal contractions that are going off as much O2 usage as possible. And this can be trained. There are some individual genetic and system quote-unquote things that people have within that can prevent the speed and height of an adaptation to this, but I've trained it a lot for people now, and it just takes time. It's not remodeling of faster fibers, it's simply creating learning patterns that the person gets better at using O2 for this muscle endurance work. And as we know, the best CrossFitters out there make basically weight training aerobic. It's not how they do it, it's what's going on to allow them to do it that we should be looking at. And I think it's in this particular area, which is muscle endurance becoming aerobic. And as mentioned, the method of doing it can come in multiple different ways. What you're seeing Solange do, which we're big proponents of here at OPEX, is really a non-eccentric component. So if you look at the context of easy aerobic work, people always were hating on aerobic work in relation to the strength continuum, because they did comparisons or a couple of studies, which is almost as bad as the fat hypothesis, or also where we think the majority of methane gas comes from. No one wants to tackle the cattle industry or agribusiness for that, but it's the same thing. As I know, it may not seem important to a number of people, and it's not really going to end up being the end of our civilization, but I think it's something that was studied a while back that people were still so afraid of in strength conditioning, is to actually do aerobic work at the same time of trying to make people stronger. And all you got to do is look out amongst what's happening to really know exactly how to do that. And the issue was they're comparing running programs to back squat 1RMs in an academic format. And of course people with running are going to get weaker in a back squat 1RM, but they never decided to look at swimmers, for example, and how they can get stronger in land training and still do 10K every couple of days in the pool. So it's still aerobic work to them, but for somehow they're getting stronger. So if you look at the physiology around that, it's largely based upon the non-eccentric components when they do that work. So you can see with Ryan here, look at his breath rate. You know, he's doing maybe, that's almost like 40 something, you know, breaths a minute. Even in recovery, he's been lying on the ground for a minute now after doing an open prep style. And Solange is probably at a 25 breath a minute, or maybe even 20 breaths per minute when she's doing her work. So the opposite difference in the aerobic work is pretty clear here, of easy aerobic work and really hard work that he was doing for 8 to 10 minutes of sustainable pace. He was just mixing everything at that high end interval, and she's basically keeping nice and relaxed as she does the whole thing with multiple different pieces. But back to the point of the strength continuum, you can see that most of the things she's doing is non-eccentric format. So we do recommend you do specific kinds of carries that are fairly light. You can do overhead carries and straight arm overhead, straight arm hanging carries, which can certainly work on different positions around the scap. She still needs to work within her program of training the scap muscle. She'll do some carries along with overhead carries, along with some front leaning rest activity. And in your close-up, you can see how she's still staying controlled during the whole activity while moving blood the whole time. And so what we'd ask people to do is to pick those non-eccentric activities and to pick multiple different modalities, such as rowing, assault bike, Versa climber, even jump rope can be easy for some people. But you want to pick those modalities and just go through the pace of those and put it in a format where you can do them in a circuit, kind of like what Solange is doing. And we recommend starting off at a really low level, like even 10 to 15 minutes of doing it over and over really simply. And it should be really simple to do. You don't need a warm-up for it. The idea of doing it is not a workout. The idea of doing it is coming in and just get started. Because the whole idea around it is to move blood. And that whole moving blood activity can help recover you for any intense activities. And you honestly can do this easy, what we call MAP 10 round the world stuff, and other variations of it multiple times in a week. People seem to forget that we have the ability to go long, and the reason why people are scared to go long is because they go long and they go hard. And so if she was to do this at a really hard rate for 60 minutes and to try to have the mentality of like getting a great sweat and burning fat and really getting her ass kicked, yeah, of course everything else is going to be tired. But the whole idea is to start to build volume by starting with those simple 15-minute little workouts a couple times a week, and then add volume to it. It's not uncommon, and this may blow your mind, but it's not uncommon for our top-end CrossFitters to have 5 AM sessions that are 60 to 90 minutes long of easy aerobic work. And then on off days of 2 days of the week, they have 60-minute sessions 3 times on those days of easy aerobic work. And it's all different styles of stuff picked in there because of what the sport involves with trying to pick on as many skills and be as good as possible. So yes, that's like, sometimes up to 8 to 12 hours of easy aerobic work all week, and they may only do 3 to 4 hours of really intense stuff in relation to what the programming is. You can also see just a slight difference here that Hank and Brian are doing some I think they're doing a MAP 3 or MAP 4, so they're doing like 90-second to 2-minute intervals of aerobic work, so it's a really high effort pace with the exact same arrest time with multiple modalities, whereas Solange again is reflecting as the much easier method for it. So in hindsight of how to do it, it's fairly simple. Get into the gym and pick these really simple modalities that you can do back and forth, have it conversational pace, maybe listen to a nice podcast during it, even possibly read a book if you're on the same machine the whole time. Maybe you can turn on a radio station and listen to something that's inspirational. I wouldn't suggest Dead Mouse. Take it from me. Listening to that and getting lost in a zone, all of a sudden I'm at 180 beats per minute on the rower after 20 minutes. So you want to have it in a case where you can focus and stay within yourself for your breath. And throw it into your training program along with some easy other opposites maybe a swim another time of the week, maybe a hike, maybe a nice long walk for 90 minutes up to a couple hours, just to keep blood moving, and it'll help your recovery between your intense pieces. If you got any questions around MAP 10 and what it means, and also easy round the world work, you can ask any of our clients. You can contact us here at OPEX Fitness, and let me know if you have any feedback on how this works for you, and put it into play, and let us know how it goes. All the best in your training, and best of luck to you.